Hi, I'm Jennifer Lee, Admin Evangelist, and this is How I Solved This. In today's episode, Salesforce MVP Tom Hoffman shows us how he uses the power of flow to dynamically share records where role hierarchy and sharing roles just don't cut it. Today, I'm with Tom Hoffman. He is a practice director with Spark Orange, a Salesforce MVP, and the Pittsburgh user group leader. Hi, Tom. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thanks for having me.
So everyone's Salesforce journey is unique. Share with us your Salesforce journey.
Sure. So Salesforce was definitely my third or fourth career. My first professional role, I was working at a print shop and newspaper, and I was doing page design and then eventually pre-press. And from there, I took sort of a left turn. I got into the counseling world. I was doing mental health and substance abuse counseling. And I worked in that capacity for about 5 years before becoming the director of a healthcare foundation at a hospital in Pittsburgh. And it was there that I became a customer of Salesforce and had my first experience working with an implementation partner, and eventually became our admin. And I wasn't a very good admin now that I look back in time. But as I was working there, was involved in some other, foundation and nonprofit related groups, and eventually met someone who was using Salesforce to manage his foundation, the Rukmini Foundation, that helps provide education for girls in rural Nepal. And he was stuck on a few things, and I offered to help, with what limited Salesforce powers I had. And after sitting down with him for about an hour and helping him through a few things, he said, "Have you ever thought about doing this for a living?" And I was like, what a fantastic idea. And that sort of began my 1-year pursuit of, transitioning from being nonprofit leader to full-time Salesforce consultant. And so I've been in the Salesforce space for just over 6 years now.
So Tom, how are you involved in the community, and what would you recommend to new admins and how they can get involved?
So I currently am our Pittsburgh admin user group leader, as you mentioned. Beyond that, right now I'm very active with mentoring. Just finished up a mentoring circles pilot with Salesforce that was really exciting. Do a lot of, I like to write, have some new posts that are going to be coming out soon. I like to speak whenever I'm invited to. And otherwise, occasionally I drop in on the answer community and like to, help people solve some problems. As far as advice for admins, I think the best thing that you can do is find your local user group. For me, in starting a local user group, I was surrounded by people who were just as passionate as I was about Salesforce. And it was just amazing to sort of realize that people were this excited about coming to work and working with this platform. And so if you don't have a local user group, start one. If you have a local user group, join it. And I think you will, it'll be just sort of this amazing opening to people who are as passionate about this as you are.
Yeah, it's just being part of the Salesforce Ohana is just like so unique and so different than like any other thing that I've ever been involved in.
Yeah, it is. I remember the first time we met. It was at a community event. It was at Northeast Dreaming.
Yes.
And I remember sitting in the lobby, and afterwards I was like, "Oh my gosh, I just talked to Jen Lee."
Yeah, I totally remember that. Like as I was thinking about today's session, I'm like, "Oh yeah, I remember sitting in that area, and we had like, I think I was eating a burger or something like that, and we chatted for a while." So thanks for bringing me back down memory lane. All right. So tell us about the business problem you're trying to solve.
Yeah. One thing that I realize on a lot of projects is that record sharing, while we have, org-wide defaults and sharing rules and all of that, that there's usually individual use cases where single users that aren't the owner of records need access. And they also fit outside of the role hierarchy. And typically, whenever we've run into this in the past and we were solutioning for it, we would always go, "Oh, great. We should have our developers write Apex sharing rules." And, as I progressed, realized that really you don't need that. You can solve this problem declaratively using Flow. And through iterations of that, have realized that we can solve it at a more macro scale using a multi-object flow and allowing it to sort of be more manageable and scalable as you do sharing across many objects. And so that's the business problem that solved.
Great. So we're admins. We need to see how to do things. So Tom, show us how you solve this.
Before I jump in, the one thing that that sort of led me down this path, I use the standard object reference guide for everything. And I tell people all the time, I keep it bookmarked because I use it every day on my job. And as I was going through this over the years, I'm always looking at it and I kept seeing things like account share. I was like, oh, okay, account share. And then you see ones like contact share and case share. And you start to realize, okay, there's a separate table that handles sharing entries for every object, standard and custom. And then looking at it, I realized I went out and saw some solutions that like Rakesh Gupta published on Automation Champion around using Flow for dynamic sharing. And that's where I built this original version of a sharing flow. Yeah, so this is an account-based sharing flow. And if you look here at my start element, it is record triggered. And this one's set to fire on create or update. And I have it set to be optimized for actions and related records, which is the new way of saying that this is a after trigger flow. And what my flow does, it runs immediately. And my first decision is to see if a lookup field that I'm using to identify a specific user I would like to share to has been updated or changed. And so I'm looking and saying, is my custom user lookup? Was it previously, is it null now? And was it populated before? Or is the prior value not equal to my new value? Or is is it not blank and it was blank previously? And then you can see my logic up here that's covering all of those conditions. And so a couple of different trees here. One, if it was changed or updated, there was a user there that no longer is in that field, I send it down this path and I get that old account share. So I say, hey, let's find the account sharing record for the user that was in this space. And was it a manual share? And if you look at the standard object reference guide, you get to see all the different values. And with flows, as admins, we can only use manual sharing when we're doing row causes. So if we find a manual share record, we delete it, and then we continue on with our flow. And so at this point, we're saying, okay, we've cleared out the old one, or there was no old one. And we're saying, okay, is there a new user in here? Is this the first time this user has been put into this lookup? And if yes, we head down this next path and we check to see, do they have an existing manual sharing record? And so we check for the account ID and the user or group ID. And we ask ourselves the next question, do they already have access? Nope. Awesome. We're going to create them an account sharing record. And if they do, we want to check if it's correct. So do they have the values that I'm looking for? I want them to have, edit access on the account. I want them to have read access on the opportunities. I want them to have edit access on the contacts, and I don't want them to have any case access. Mm-hmm. And so I'm checking to make sure that the values for a pre-existing sharing record are correct. And if they're not, I'm updating them. A fun thing about sharing records, I didn't know this. If you go to create a sharing record where the user already has one, it won't throw an error. It just updates it automatically. Oh. So it was a fun trick that I found because I realized I'm pointing nope, not correct, and the nope path to the same create action. It's because the create action actually creates and updates. Only time in Salesforce I found that to be true. So this is the basic version of the flow. Right, so this is the single object one, and this is where I initially began with dynamic record sharing, and then I realized that I need this to be scalable. Mm-hmm. And the use case where this came into play was in working with a university. They oftentimes tagged faculty to individual records, while the deans or the program and course managers owned the records, the faculty needed access to the courses or to tests or grades. And so throughout the entire system, we needed to be able to do record sharing based off of the linked faculty member. And rather than writing just dozens and dozens of Apex sharing rules, we realized that we can instead use a multi-object flow to solve this. And that's this version of the flow. And so if you notice on the input side, we have a few variables. And what we're passing in is the record ID and the object name. And then we're also passing in the prior user value from our lookup, and then the current user value from our lookup. And so from any record triggered flow, we just send these 4 variables to our multi-object flow. And once they're populated, the first thing we do is say, great, which object are we working with? And so you can see it's passing in plain text the object name. So account, opportunity, contact, case, or in this case, my example custom object. From here, and we'll follow the account path, we're using those same variables. I'm asking, is my prior user input null? If it is, I can keep on going. If my prior user was populated, then I'm going to do the same thing as I did before. I'm checking if they had a prior account share that was manual. And if they don't, I'm continuing down the new user path. If they did, then I'm going to delete it and then continue down my new user path. So once I have, then I check again, is my new user variable populated or was it changed? Same logic as I used last time. And we follow the same decision tree. I'm going to check for existing access. I'm going to decide if they already have access or not. And I'm going to see if that access is correct and then correct it if it isn't. And if they do not already have access, I create that access here. You can tell that I did this one first and I discovered that little create also equals update trick on the other iteration of the flow because here I had them separate originally.
I love how you name your flow elements. Great, delete it. Sweet, give them access.
I don't know if my coworkers and the clients I work with appreciate my humor or not, but I write all sorts of crazy names inside of here. I'll often switch back and forth between English and Spanish. I can't not just have my personality present at all times, and so apologies for those that are both amused and not amused. Yeah, so going down the tree, and this is really cool to set up because once you have this initial branch, all you have to do is just grab it. Oh, I want all of those. Oh, there we go. Grab the part you want and just copy it. And then you can start making an entire new branch. And so we're going to add another one here and we'll say, another object. And my input variable is another custom object. We draw our path here to our first decision. And then you just have to update the names. So you can just go through and edit all of these. I always suggest updating your API names and things so it's not confusing for error handling. And you can keep building on this until you have this very robust multi-object flow that handles all sharing. And I would say it takes much less time than Apex sharing. You don't have to worry about any sort of code coverage and all that sort of all those sort of things. It's scalable, and the best part is, as admins, we can do it. We can do it very quickly.
So I loved how you use the power of flow to solve a business problem, to dynamically share records, not only by a single object, but a multi-object. And you're able to do it, pretty quickly. Like once you set up the initial structure and then be able to use that copy and paste thing. And that really allows the admin to be efficient and quickly create those flows. So that's pretty great.
Thanks. And I think in this, we're entering this, not just flow forward, but sort of flow only world over the next few years. creating reusable flow elements is going to be more important than ever for admins. And so starting to adopt traditional design patterns, right, in terms of, chunks of code that developers will reuse to solve the same problem again and again, bringing that same pattern down into flow now is going to be critical. And things, we solve a lot of the same business problems, even across multiple objects. How can we reuse things that we've already built and call them via subflows from our other record triggered flows to sort of maximize our time, make the system more efficient, make the system more manageable, so we don't have a ton of little subflows everywhere.
Yeah, it's definitely going towards the mantra, work smart, not harder, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So great. Thank you so much for being a guest on How I Solve This and for sharing your awesome business solution.
Great. Well, thanks for having me. This was fun.
You just saw the awesome Tom Hoffman share a cool flow solution where he creatively used automation to dynamically share records to users. #GoTheFlow. You can always find videos like this at admin.salesforce.com and also by subscribing to our YouTube channel, Salesforce Admins, so you never miss another episode of How I Solve This. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Awesome admin.